This video is an excerpt from our weekly podcast. Go and watch the full podcast, check the link in the description of this video, or support us on Patreon at patreon.com/prettygoodgaming. PlayStation fans, get excited. Sony is working on 12 to 13 new IPs. What?
Can you Adam and Eve it? So this is from a article by Wired, and it's a bit... I don't know what the word is, flimsy maybe, or wishy-washy sort of. It's not like a news thing. It's titled, the PlayStation 5 is starting to look like the revolution it promised, but I don't think it makes that argument particularly well. But just some quick facts to get off the case. The PS5, despite the meme of it being virtually impossible to get hold of, it has done very well. Perhaps not good as well as it could have if they didn't have these shortages. So it launched on November 12th or 19th worldwide. So between then and March 31st, it sold 7.8 million units, making it the fastest selling console in US history. The big thing for me is where the hell are the games? At the moment, you've got Demon's Souls, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Destruction All-Stars, Sackboy, and Astro's Playroom. Some of those you can still play on PS4 anyway, so it's a bit of a question mark of if they should really be classed as PS5 games, and Demon's Souls is a remake of an older game. Then they just brought out Returnal, which kind of shook things up a little bit. People quite like it. Ratchet and Clank is meant to be coming next month, and then supposedly this year we're getting God of War and Horizon Forbidden West, but I've said it 100 times, I have my doubts about either of those. But they are starting to pick up a little bit of momentum very slowly, which is, I mean, it's to be expected. It's the start of a generation, isn't it? But so this information about 25 new games being developed by Sony, about half of which are going to be new IPs. This is from former Guerrilla Games boss and current head of Sony Worldwide Studios, Herman Hulst. I really like Herman Hulst. Like, when you watch interviews and stuff with him, he just seems really... He's a good person to listen to speak. So according to him, these 25 games are coming, and nearly half of them are new IPs. So that's not the quote that they say he said this. And then the actual quote is, which he kind of elaborated on, but not really. There's an incredible amount of variety originating from different regions, and there's going to be big, small, different genres. But other than that, he doesn't really say anything else. So the easy headline, which I'm sure we're going to put on the video for this, and all of the media outlets are covered, is Sony working on 25 new games, half of which are new IPs. That's basically the extent of the information on it. Yeah. It kind of just ends there. So this sounds great. I mean, more games. Sony has quite a good track record. They have faced a lot of criticism, though, for pretty much making the same game kind of every time. Almost all of the big ones are third-person, cinematic, narrative-driven action-adventure titles with a few little vague RPG things here and there. And this response from Herman Hulst really seems to me like a kind of a response to the Bloomberg article from a few weeks ago, which basically slammed Sony's stance on exclusives and blockbuster games specifically, and how it doesn't really want to fuck around with smaller, more experimental indie projects, and will only do surefire hits like your Last of Us is, or something. Yeah. Anything made by Naughty Dog really is going to make money. And I do think there is some truth to the idea that all of Sony's games are the same. I mean, when was the last time they did a first-person shooter or a strategy game or anything of a genre other than third-person action adventure to that extent? Then along comes Returnal, which has spiced things up nicely, because that's a third-person action adventure game, but it's like a bullet hell shooter, and the narrative is non-linear. There's a bunch of like weird horror elements. I've not played it yet, just to clarify, but it's meant to be quite good. Meant to be bloody hard, and there's the debate about that as well going on. I'd love to see Sony experiment more, and if Herman Hulst is to be believed, that is the case, but we just have to wait and see, because we have no idea. There's not a lot to this statement about 25 games coming. There's just nothing else from it, which is, yeah, it's frustrating, because you see all the headlines like, oh cool, and anything more? God forbid there be a specific game mentioned in that 25 list. But nope, all the elaboration you're gonna get. Although the article does half go on to mention indie projects, but I think this is really inaccurate and a bit presumptuous. So they kind of suggest that among these 25 there's a few indies, including one from Haven Studios, which is the new one set up by Jade Raymond, who is
formerly Stadia.
She's been sort of everywhere.
Yeah, she's been at EA and then Stadia and jumped that sinking ship.
Yeah, she left that as soon as it was going to help. But so this is a new studio that is independent. It's not owned by Sony, but they've secured funding from Sony to make whatever their game is. But we know nothing about it. Then there's another one. They mentioned Firewalk Studios, but I don't really know what it is they're doing at the moment. Technically, these are independent, but the term indie doesn't really mean that anymore. It's more of it's a sense of scale and production value these days, and I don't think it's fair to necessarily term these games as indie games when we don't know anything about them. And it also name drops Kena or Kena or Kana, I've heard it pronounced every which way, Bridge of Spirits, which exactly highlights my point, because this is one of my most anticipated games. I think it looks really, really good, but I wouldn't call it indie. You know, it's one of the, it's that awkward mid-level, because AAA can range from your Call of Duties, and then you've got indie, which can be some dumb shit asset flip that's on Steam, which anyone can upload and anyone can make. And then you've got games like Hades or Stardew Valley, both which are massively successful indie games, but even in that space, they're wildly different in their development. Hades is, I mean, it's a roguelike isometric game, which generally are indies, but it's still got quite a high budget, it's fully voiced, it's got really, really nice visuals. But then Stardew Valley is literally developed by one guy, it's pixel art, it's got this real 8-bit charm to it, so they're totally different ends of even just the indie spectrum. So I think saying something like, Sony working on indies too, I'm like, but are they? Because what does that mean to you? I don't think that's the case. If they come out with like a pixel platformer, then I'll be like, okay, it's kind of an indie thing. Yeah. Why not?
And I mean, the definition of indie is independent, right? And how can Sony, the big publisher, work on an independent when obviously
they're
they
not
can't
publishing it independently?
Exactly, because they by association.
Although, but even on that argument, if you want to play the semantics game, you could say a first-party game like God of War or Horizon, that's indie because Sony built it themselves and published it themselves. They're just the biggest one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, so it's not quite the same. So I think that's a bit of an odd thing to say. I mean, perhaps this journalist knows more than I do. I would assume they do. Throughout the article, there's a few quotes from different Sony people like Herman Holst, Jim Ryan, who's the big boss at Sony, and Mark Cerny, who is the brains behind the PS5 console. There's a few little anecdotal quotes from them. So he's been chatting away to people, but this article it's not a lot in the way of information. The whole kind of thrust of it is that the PS5 revolution that's about to happen with the games industry is about to happen with all these 25 games, but we don't know what any of them are. Yeah. So it's just kind of a nothing piece to me anyway.
Yeah, it's slightly annoying. If you've been wanting to get hold of a PlayStation 5, they're talking about that they're expecting demand to be high, and there's probably going to be a sort of shortage until next year, even if you want a PlayStation 5 now. They sold 7.8 million. Fastest selling console in the US history. That's because there's more scalpers around than there ever have been, and we can't. Nobody who wants a PlayStation 5 can get their hands on one, despite the successes of it. And the only people who are really cheering are the scalpers. It's still a huge problem. They're not addressing it. It's a bit. They've got all these games coming up. They don't need to announce games right now. If they're selling the consoles and they're selling every single unit that they create at the moment, that's all they're worried about.
Yeah, and they don't need to do anything right now, really.
And touching on the strategy for making games, we talked about it before, but single player games are what we like, right? We enjoy our single player experiences.
Yes.
Sony are renowned for making those single player experiences, making our dreams come true in those respects. The reason that they do generate these, we say they're generic, all these third person action games come from Sony. They've got this captured audience, the captive audience. They know what their fans like, and this is what we like as first party exclusive single player games, which are literally system sellers. This is why the PlayStation 5 demand is so high. This is why people are really pissed off because they can't get hold of them. It's because they know that Sony are going to deliver in that respect. These 25 games that they're working on, a lot of them are going to be system sellers. Hopefully, they don't have a lot out now. You've mentioned that already, but you can guarantee the next God of War is going to be in demand. The next Horizon Zero Dawn. If you played the previous one, you're going to want to be playing the next one. Whatever they come up with in the Spider-Man, that they're going to deliver in terms of games, first-party exclusives. That's why the demand is so high, and that's why PlayStation 5 is doing so well, according to them.
Well, on the topic of the PS5 doing well, it's doing kind of a lot better than I thought. So apparently there's an 81% increase in the amount of time users are spending on their PS5s versus the PS4 for the same window. So 81% more people are playing their PS5 in 2020 to 2021 compared with the PS4, which is 2013 to 2014. Now, that's largely because the games industry is bigger than it was then. It continues to grow and grow and grow. It's much more mainstream than it ever was. And people are locked inside, which is, that shouldn't really come as a surprise. But also the PS5, despite having all of these supply shortages, which is due to specific components that they physically can't get hold of at the moment because of factories and pandemic problems and all that sort of stuff. The PS5 is off to a bigger start than the PS4 and has sold 11% more units in this 6 months or whatever. Despite, at least in my opinion, having very little to offer that you can't currently play elsewhere. But again, that's just me. There's a couple of games that people really like, and you can play newer games just better on it, so that's cool.
Glossing over that point, it may be doing it a disservice, but the fact that this hardware is so much of an upgrade from the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 is years and years old. You can play your perhaps older games, but at 60 frames a second and 4K. That is, you can't undervalue that.
Nope.
I mean, how many people are just sick of playing? Either you choose 4K or you choose 60 frames per second. Can't do both. It's like having that gameplay experience now. It's just old. Like, give me the fastest, give me the newest, give me the prettiest. That's what people want, and that's what they get in the PlayStation 5, regardless of how many games are on the platform.
Exactly. Yeah, that means more to a lot more people. And interestingly, again, cross-platform titles like your Assassin's Creeds and your Call of Duties and whatever, they are apparently selling more copies on PS5 than they are on Xbox Series X/Series S. Okay, it's one of those where it's a bit of a shock, but at the same time, Sony went into this generation with so much goodwill, and Xbox their whole brand at the moment doesn't seem that fussed about game sales and unit sales of the system compared to what it used to be. So I'm sure Microsoft doesn't really care that much about losing out on unit sales to Sony, because its Game Pass is its big thing now. That's its driving force going forward. In terms of the PS5 shortages and whatnot, I definitely believe that they're ready to go with more, but they're waiting for the right moment. E3 season is coming up, like we said, and Sony will do something. Presumably, we're going to get a bit more information about Horizon and God of War, because they are supposed to be coming this year. At the very least, I expect to get a revised release date for either of them, saying 2022. But whenever that information comes out, which would probably be in the next, 6 weeks or so, then they'll drop the new PS5 like swarm, the next bulk of units, because it will spike interest. Search engine terms for Horizon Zero Dawn pre-order or whatever will go through the roof, even if it doesn't have a release date, and then that will automatically drive sales of the PS5. So they're definitely not going to come out with anything anytime soon, like in the next week or so. But when summer kicks off, all of these new reveals are coming out. That's when you say Horizon Zero Dawn's coming out December 15th, 2021, and also here's a nice shiny PS5 that's available right now for about 4 seconds if you get there quick enough.
Yeah. I mean, it is frustrating to think about the amount of PlayStation 5s that aren't available, that are in demand. But at the same time, I think it's just testament to how well they did last generation with all the knockout games that they produced on the PlayStation 4. The demand is so high. People know what they're getting from a first-party exclusive PlayStation game. That's why the demand is so high, and they're reaping the rewards and the benefits. So yeah, some people are having to pay double the price for a PlayStation 5 right now because scalpers, and they haven't done enough to curtail the scalpers, and they should be doing more, let's put it that way. But still, their strategy, producing these single player games and throwing a lot of money in these experiences that we all love, it's paying off, and I think that it's just testament to them. They've done really well, and it looks like that going into the future. You're saying that 11% more units has been sold with PlayStation 5 versus PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 is second biggest selling console of all time, so that stands the PlayStation 5 in good stead, that's for sure. And it wouldn't be surprising if the PlayStation 5 breaks most, if not all, records.
Hopefully when E3 rolls around, we'll learn a bit more about at least a couple of these 25 games, maybe even some of these new IPs. But
for sure, yeah.
Here, 25 is such a nice number. Things will change. A couple of them might get cancelled. A couple of new ones might pop up, behind the scenes that we don't know about. But hearing that 25 Sony games are coming, that's great news. That's something to be paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to go and watch the full podcast, head to the description of this video and you'll find a link to our new podcast channel, or head over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming and get early access.